first for me. I know that you've been filming this before, but thank you guys all for coming. I know that this, I'll say just kind of reach and go like this to yourselves, because this is the first step. Making steps to, talk about funeral planning is not the easy, yeah, you can, if we're here with a spouse, pat each other, you bet, because it's not easy to do, but hopefully today it's a serious topic, but we're going to kind of keep it a little lighter, okay? So I'm Melissa. I work with Gunderson Funeral Home. This is just our home screen as far as all of the locations that we have around in Dane County and one in Columbia County. We have 9 locations. I will talk a little bit about myself in a minute, but our history, here's our family history. Oh, I totally forgot about this. So I felt that I was loud enough, but all right. So our family history of Gunderson, we are celebrating our 101 year. We were in every single parade in Dane County last year. We'll probably be in a lot of parades this year, but every single parade in Dane County. But it's a fifth, well, kind of sort of saying, it's 4th generation family-owned business. And in the middle is Pete Gunderson. Behind him flanks his father, Bob, and his grandfather, Elmer and Inez. And to his left is his son, which would be the 4th generation, Matt Gunderson. He's in administration and vice president, and to his right is Skylar Gunderson, his nephew, who grew up in Stoughton area, so the Gunderson family has been around for a while. So probably serving Greater Madison for over 101 years. This is part of our 5th generation. He is a grief therapy dog, and we call him Elmer. He like myself, will give hugs on command. He definitely comes and meets with families on a very hard day, and will bring a smile on a very hard day. So you will oftentimes see him at the funeral home helping families.
So where do you send it? Excuse me. Where do you send a dog to get grief therapy training?
He did have, well, he failed miserably as a guard or the guide dog because he is too friendly. But he did have to take, he has to, be, he's certified, so he had to go and do, train, go into arrangements with people, do those types of things, make sure that I wasn't witness to the certification. I just know that he does have a certificate. And in fact, one of these, we'll try and get him out to one of these senior centers at one of these visits, if he can come out. So depending on if we show his certifications and all that stuff. So. But you will see him in the funeral home. He usually is helping families. So this is, and I think you guys, if you guys attended last seminar, we call ourselves the A team, and what A means, and usually I have that up there, means advanced care, advanced planning, and aftercare. So Heather gave the presentation on writing your own obituary, and I was going to ask Ann, did anybody come to that writing your own obituary? I wanted to necessarily have it be I was supposed to present that, but I was gone, so there's a little bit more to it than what I think Heather presented, so I might ask Ann if we can do that one again. So as long as she gave you the five tips, I'm hoping that she gave you that, but there's a little bit more to it. So anyway, so these are my colleagues. That's what we do day in and day out, is talk about advanced planning for with families. And then we also, I call it myself a bookend, so I help families advance. And after, your funeral director is what we call the meat of the book. During loss, they're helping you at that time. We all work together as a team to make sure your family is doing good well beyond your loved one's passing. Provide grief resources and whatnot. So a little bit about me. I think I was mentioning to Dan over there. I used to be the executive director of the Mount Horeb Chamber of Commerce for 15 years, and I also worked for the Alzheimer's and Dementia Alliance of Wisconsin, helping families, helping businesses. I do love to help families and people. It's just in my nature, so that's a little bit about me. So today we're here to talk about the 7 deadly mistakes in funeral planning. Kind of poke a little fun at it. It is what it is. So mistake number 1, and there's a little flyer inside that you can follow along with the notes or take extra notes on if you want. We call it number 1 the back burner. Meaning you are making it and putting it on the back burner. You're making it a low priority. So it's not as important as other things. It's not easy to get to, which we will talk about in a lot of other slides and screens. But some of the things that are said is our children will take care of it. I can attest to that right now. My father, we had to put him in assisted living, and he's getting towards his end of life, and he's been a pack rat all of his life and hasn't made a lot of plans. And I will speak a lot about him, and also my mother, who I lost 11 years ago, but we were not pre-planned, and that caught us off guard. So I will talk a lot about that and mistakes that my family made, which is not easy. So, dying is too expensive. Can't afford it. Well, who knows and who thinks that prices ever go down? I will testify or say that at the beginning of when I started doing this presentation, because I use a hyperbole of eggs and how eggs have gone down. Whew, thank God, they were $6 a dozen. So now they're back down. But I will use that as an example. There are some things that do go down, gas prices and that stuff. But typically, your prices are not going to go down. We're way too young to think about it, even think about it. Yes? But we don't know when somebody's going to pass. And yes, of course, we don't want to talk about it. We think we're too young, but I get it. It's too depressing. We agree. Even for you, like I'm saying, pat yourselves on the back. It's not an easy topic to talk about it. I'm trying to make you guys feel as comfortable as possible talking about this hard topic. But yes, it is depressing. And we'll just deal with it when someone gets sick or dies. I will again testify to that is not the best option for anyone. My mom was in the palliative care unit. It was not easy. It's very hard. Growing old is mandatory, but growing up is optional. Walt Disney. Mistake number 2. I'm going to toggle between this next slide, though. So who here has planned a wedding for a loved one, yourselves? Okay? I see a show of hands. Okay? How long did it take you? 2 years. 2 years.
A month.
A month. You're one of the very small exceptions.
About 6 months.
6 months seems common, very common. Okay, so thinking about all of those things that went into the planning of a wedding. Those who haven't planned can probably imagine. So, mistake number 2 is not it. There are 100 some plus decisions that have to be made. Now think of it, someone has passed. Those same types of decisions have to go into your funeral planning. Similar, you're celebrating someone's life, whether it's the most simplistic or it's more elaborate. There are a lot of things that still go into the planning, even if it might even be simplistic, and decisions that you have to make in a very short amount of time, 24 to 48 hours. Oh boy, you show up last, you gotta get in the front seat. If you guys wanna sit in the back, we can move a chair back there. Do you want to do that? All right. He asked if I bite. Since he asked me, I might. You're welcome. So, just getting back on that in terms of mistakes, that you have to make a lot of decisions in a short amount of time. some people say not it because my life insurance proceeds, but what they do, my life insurance will cover it, and it will. Your life insurance, you can use your life insurance to use it. But what we say and suggest is if you have life insurance and you want to do that, know that it can erode over time. So just come in and make the plan, if you have life insurance, to make sure that it is going to cover what your plans are for that. So I'm just going to give an example. If someone has a $10,000 policy, and even from a simplistic cremation and any kind of memorial service is getting close to $10,000. So anything additional that you want to have over that, somebody's got to pick up the cost of that. Okay? Kids don't often agree about important decisions. I've mentioned a little bit about well, I didn't say my brother and I, but I have one sibling, and so when my mom passed away, there were things that we didn't agree on. I've since gotten over some things, he has since gotten over things, and that's fine, but I have heard other colleagues, when they've talked to people about their pre-planning, the simplest things family members or people can disagree on. I've heard the simplest thing is that a chicken salad sandwich versus a ham sandwich served at the luncheon, they aren't speaking to each other because one chose the other. There are different, I know that that's a hyperbole and seems extreme, but to some families it might not be. Did you have a
No,
question?
it's the same idea. My mother and her sister, my mother and her sister-in-law got into an argument over my grandmother's goods, and they literally never spoke again until they both died.
And that is unfortunate. So, but sometimes that does happen. And I talk a lot about this, is emotional overspending is common and can be avoided if you do this in advance. I emotionally overspent because I wanted the best urn. My mom elected cremation for herself. We at least knew that. My mom was in the palliative care unit and had hours to live, and we were supposed to be meeting with a funeral director, and I wanted to spend all the time with her at the time. We were lucky she bounced back for 3 weeks, but I wanted to have a special urn. I think I mentioned I was the chamber director out in Mount Horeb, so there's an artist out there. I had a special urn made for her. Now, did I know that my mom, for the most part, my life, she was a very frugal woman. Did she want me to do that? Probably not. I was doing it maybe for my dad and myself, and I probably didn't need to do that for our family, but I felt at the time I probably emotionally overspent. I also wanted to give the best eulogy, and I wanted to do, everything special. So there was the height of emotion, which we'll talk about in the next screen, and what's going on in your brain when a loss has occurred. So in times of stress, at the height of also happiness, the height of happiness as well as grief, the part of your brain that is being used is the survival part, or what's called the amygdala and the hypothalamus glands of your brain. That is the fight or flight part of your brain that you're using, because you're not necessarily thinking logically. You're kind of doing, reacting. Okay? So when we're doing things, when it's not stressed, you're using the prefrontal cortex part of your brain. And that is where creativity and logic come through. So had that been happening for my family, yes, there was some logic that was, after the height, probably after things, we knew that she wasn't going to pass right away. Things probably tapered off, but we were still scrambling and at the height of things. So we could think a little bit more logically and do a little bit more creative thinking. I still probably could go back. I could have done this better. I could have done this. So again, emotionally overspending for me, my brother, and my father. What we call mistake number 3 is baby chick. Cheap, 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 cheap. The thing is if an inexpensive funeral plan is right for you, let's find that out. It might not be. So like say for example, not everybody drives, because like I could meet with every single one of you and you'd have probably a different funeral plan. In various, and if money is most important, then let's find that out and let's see what that is in terms of the expense of what a funeral is. So what you do, and where I was going with that is like not everybody also in here probably drives the same car. So you have different selections and different things that you are thinking that are important to you. Okay? So how you do that, and when you're doing those types of things, when you're picking out a car, or picking out a home, or picking out clothes, or picking out whatever, you're doing your homework. So do your homework ahead of time. So also decide what's important for your family. And if it's price, then it's price. So why should your family choose one funeral home over the other, or another one, or another choice? If the prices are higher, ask why. Why are they? Making sure, and I will refer to this again, that you're comparing the same to the same, apples to apples, that they're giving you the same services and the same thing. So what do others offer that one does or does not? And we also mentioned how long have they been serving in your community? Are they a part of your community? So he had over 2,000 Facebook friends. I was expecting a bigger turnout. So this just goes to say, you know, when you're doing your planning, you know, if you're gauging it on Facebook, and you think you have a lot of friends and family, and you think that there's going to be that could have been a little bit of an expensive funeral if you're thinking 2,000 friends would come to your funeral. So. The next mistake is called ET phone home. I say this for 2 reasons. It's because, number one, you usually are doing some type of your research other than coming and doing some of this stuff by just picking up the phone and calling and just asking questions and inquiring. The other reason is that sometimes people think the funeral people are extraterrestrials. Typically, you don't know where the funeral home is until you need it, or you're going and visiting a loved one. So, we ask, because sometimes when you're visiting, you are seeing, so visit a funeral home for yourself in advance. Because sometimes you might see it in a different light if you're doing it for yourself versus visiting for a loved one, a friend that you have lost. Ask for a tour. We are not extraterrestrials. We are friendly folk that are proud to serve your family. Be introduced to staff members. They're part of your community. They're often going to community festivals, being in parades, whatnot. Normally they also are living within your community as well. And then how did you feel walking through the funeral home? How did it make you feel? Why I say this and what products and services do they offer is because in the funeral industry, we are dealing with precious commodities, your family. It's important that we take care of your family. So we take it seriously. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Maya Angelou. And Gunderson Funeral Home takes that quote very seriously as well. Mistake number 5, I've mentioned this a little bit, talking about comparing apples to apples, apples to oranges, those types of things. So making sure that the professional services and the hearse and the obituaries and all of those things that are usually going into funeral planning are comparing up. And sometimes most people think that that's what the funeral home is there to do and that that's what they're going to be doing. Make sure. So some less expensive funeral options, that stuff might be extra for your family to pay for those types of things, okay? So some of the merchandise might look the same. Make sure it's comparable. I use an example of whether some things, if you're thinking that you're having a solid oak casket versus one that's stained to look like oak, make sure that that's comparable. So I mentioned that what I do day in and day out is meet with families. What I do is I find out about the fabulous lives that you've been living. I usually jot down notes, lots of notes, things that are needed on a death certificate to record things in advance, as well as helping your family start writing an obituary, except for the people that have attended and probably have written their own already, but happy to take notes to find out about your life. As well as I'm giving you, working through your wishes and giving you a cost estimate of what, as we plan, what your funeral would cost if you had passed away that day, and it would cost you in the future. So always get a general price list, handing that out to you. We are working through usually a package selection of things that are for you and your family, the best option for your funeral. Does that place offer payment options? So typically, in advance, we can kind of pay for it like a car loan. When you pass away, the money needs to be upfront and paid for before services are rendered. So if you have a $15,000 funeral, don't have life insurance, whatnot, your family has to come up with $15,000 quickly. I go back, and I don't mean to laugh at this, but I said this, so we had to come out. This is my family, once again, and horrifying, because we lived in the community of a small community, more rural, Montello, Wisconsin. I don't know if folks know where that is. We bounced the check to the funeral home. Yep, we did. My dad took it out of the wrong account, but found out later, you're writing out the check, we had it, we thought we had it there, but yeah, you're horrified. Everybody knows. I'm like, the banker, your bank person, and whatever. I'm like, Dad, really? So, just talking about that. So we needed to, come up with all the funds at the time. So, and actually then also guaranteed pricing. Does the funeral home offer guaranteed pricing that you're doing? So typically what happens is that there's a plan where funeral homes in advance can price freeze services and merchandise, the things that we can control the costs of. The things that we can't, like things like obituary notices, honorariums to the clergy, food, those types of things we can't control the cost of. And that's again where I use my hyperbole of the eggs. So things like if you're talking about food, and here's where I say, so if you're doing a funeral planning and your family loves deviled eggs, and they planned and you planned and you wanted to have 600 deviled eggs served to everybody. Well, we can't control the cost if you had planned for it and when eggs were $1 a dozen. And then just this recently before it went down and you had passed and it was $6 a dozen. So we can't control that cost if your family still wanted to have deviled eggs for all of your family. But then they also have the option of saying, Yeah, we don't want that.
Okay,
Yes,
so,
sir.
I mentioned to you that,
You're welcome.
I mentioned to you that, my wife and my family, I'll go to Gunderson West, nice place, and, nice people. And, so my memory is my mom passed away in 16, and my mom and dad my dad's still alive, but seeing today. And, so they had paid for their funerals in advance. So something like, when this occurred, that, the interest on the payment for the funeral had grown, and there was enough there to pay for all the food for her visitation. Can you comment on that?
It did or didn't?
It did.
So, the cash advances, so yes, did you do any subtractions whatsoever from anything that you had planned?
Oh, my mom and dad did it all, so
Okay.
I don't know anything about it.
So sometimes, and that's great, so so when you're doing planning, and it sounds like your parents did very thorough planning and had pretty much everything set aside. Sometimes families just, and that's fine, as long as you get something in plans, we think that's awesome, okay? So they must have had enough in terms of growth, which basically what happened is that we priced grows if they picked the casket in an outer burial container and merchandise and the services, we had to price freeze that. So whatever they paid for back however many years ago, 2016 you said? Okay, we had to give that to them at that price, okay? The growth on the rest that they put also gained growth. So the monies that they put, so say it was $3,000. So it gained enough to offset, so there's things like flowers and food, and so that usually is less of a share, but it gained enough to where it paid for itself. Because we had to give it at that price. Yes. So does that make sense to people? Okay.
Just because my brain works this way, I kind of, after the funeral, someone from your Gunderson came to my dad's house and chatted. And somehow the number of my head sticks that the price that she had earned from interest was $500.
So that's pretty good. So $500 extra, so it probably helped offset some other things too, in terms of the growth of maybe the flowers, but sometimes so there was enough for extra food, or did they put monies aside for food too?
I don't know, they very.
So if they kept everything the same and maybe they didn't even select food, and there was enough growth, then it gave the family the option to have some kind of little food option for them. So, does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay? If sometimes you do it the other way, that's fine too. You just say, get a plan done. That's mainly the main thing. Just get a plan.
Thank you.
Whether you opt to fund, we'll give you your funding options, but get plans done. Okay? So can you guys see whose funeral this is? He looks so natural, so peaceful. Dr. Scholes, I've had other people say, I don't know I thought he would have better looking feet. He was Dr. Scholes. Mistake number 6 is trust me. I think I've mentioned this before, that we take this very seriously because it's a precious commodity. You guys, your family is a precious commodity to you, and we want to treat that as such. So you have only one chance to make the right decision about a funeral home. So do your research in advance. How did the facility and staff make you feel? And this is when you're probably also visiting other funerals from friends. Okay? Preparation and presentation of the deceased, if that is what you're seeing. So when we do this in advance, I mentioned that I try and find out about your fabulous lives that you're living. So what I do is where I can make recommendations, and because we're thinking logically, because what part of the brain are we using? The prefrontal cortex of our brain, where creativity and logic come. I can make recommendations for your family. If your family likes Harleys, we can have your Harley. Or if, I'm thinking about my father's funeral as I'm like, he loved old cars. He had a 1933 Packard. You darn betcha we are going to have a picture of that 1933 Packard, and it was his pride and joy. We don't still have it, but we will definitely have something to that nature for that. But one of the things that I shared that I mentioned, that when I met with a family, so this was grandma. I'm saying grandma because the children were there and there were grandchildren at the arrangement. She is still with us. So she has a fabulous banana bread recipe. This came out in our conversation, and her family loves it. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's raving about it. Okay, so she shared with me that for her immediate family and grandchildren, she is having special breadboards, wood breadboards made with the recipe engraved. But in finding that out about her, I take it to the next level. I'm like, okay, well, do you want to take that to your grave and just only give it to your immediate family, or do you want others to know and share in the recipe? So you could have that served. You could have banana bread served for your visitors and your loved ones. Or you could have that banana bread recipe on the back of maybe the memorial folder, or those types of things. Another thing that I shared, a friend of mine, his father, when he passed away, he was a math teacher at La Follette, and he loved Sudoku, word finds, those types of things. So on the back of the memorial folder, they had words that pertain to him, and you could circle the words and word find things about him and his family. And then they also had a Sudoku puzzle on the back for people. So it's just a personalized thing. But when we find those things out about you, when I find those things out about you, then we can make those recommendations to your family, okay? Okay, so I think we talked a little about, personalization, we talked a little bit about that. And again, trust, because we're talking about trust, we take it seriously. So we are working with your family. Of course, you need to trust the people. You get to know them. That's why they're in your community. You want to do that research in advance. And when you feel comfortable with whatever funeral home you choose, then that's, in terms of the trust, and like when you're starting that off and you've done this research, then I think that you can feel at peace, that you can feel that that's going to happen and you can trust them. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. Warren Buffett. And mistake number 7, call it quicksand. So this means that you are never stuck with what you have. So sometimes families, as this gentleman was sharing, 2016 wasn't that long ago, but some families have planned 20, 30 years ago. Cremation wasn't necessarily, even when we did my mom's funeral planning, cremation wasn't as, and it might not be right for you, but for some folks it is. But farther back, it wasn't, I'm not saying taboo, but less and less people did cremation in terms of options. So they might have planned for something that would cost a little bit more, because when you typically do what we tend to say is traditional with a casket in an outer burial container and, or vault is what you call it. Typically, those two items there are typically about $5,000 more for a funeral. So if you don't have those things, then it can be a little bit less. So, and so why I'm saying is that some families that have planned 30 years ago, it might have changed. So come in and do a review. It's okay. I mean, I know you don't want to necessarily come into the funeral home all the time, pre-plan, right? But it's okay to review and make changes. Oftentimes, since some of you, we've talked about writing your own obituary, when we say share a draft with your funeral home, we're happy to take another draft. We're happy to take any kind of updates to your file. Even if after we've met, you didn't have a plot picked out or something like, we're happy to have all of that information just in another space with the funeral home, so you have it, okay? So you have it. Sometimes it gets rather chaotic when the loss of a loved one occurs and you're scrambling, looking for paper, oh, I knew I saw that, or whatever, because again, our flight or fight part of our brain is like, where is that? You know, you just can't find that. Like, also when you're looking for something, you're supposed to stop looking for it because then it'll turn on. Because like if you continue to look for it and you can't find it, that's kind of the same thing. We talked a little bit about this in terms of insurance plans. We honor insurance coverage. So what, again, talking about making sure what your insurance has by meeting us in advance to talk about if that's enough coverage for what you have for your funeral. And then a lot of times in terms of insurance companies, there is a simple form that you can do in advance, or you can do it when you pass. There's a simple form that you can assign your insurance policy to a funeral home. Okay? So this last slide is this is the book that I use when I meet with you. You guys, it is a gift for you. It basically, so if people have done trust planning, sometimes your church has these kinds of guides, but it is basically for your funeral. It's specific. You know, sometimes people say I've done my trust or I've done something to that nature. When you've done a trust or you've done your estate planning or whatever, it's the little back section that no one ever kind of finishes because it is for end of life and your funeral plan. So essentially this book you can lay out, and some of it might not, every 18 pages might not pertain to every single thing that you want, but it gives you a place to record information, and then what I say is go put it in a safe place for your loved ones to find after you plan, because this is for you to record. I will give you the notes when you meet with me of what I've taken in terms of the notes that help, if you don't want to jot it down yourself. Okay, any questions? Yes, sir?
So, my wife and I just have very modest means. I mean, we have enough, which is, you know, it's like, we have a lot of value in our life, if not a lot of things. So, would you be the people to talk to about, like, we want to leave small, whatever money's left in our, you know, savings or checking, that kind of thing. After both of us are gone, we'd like to leave some money behind for like graduate college or things like that. Would we be able to talk about that with you?
You can, just in terms of recording it. So like say for example, what we say, so a lot of times people say in their memorial folder or in their obituary, in lieu of flowers, give a donation to your favorite charity. I just will add to that, even though you say that, you still will get flowers. You will get less, but you will still get flowers no matter, because people just do it that way. But that's where, 'cause I'm not a financial planner. So from that perspective, if there's certain designations of what you want to have happen to charity, then you should have that written down somewhere else. But I will definitely take that information and put it, if you have your favorite charities, I will write that down, but that will be a book where you want to record that information, but we can also have documentation, and your charity might change over time too, as far as who you want and who you want.
So we talked to our credit union about that, our financial advisor there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can talk to you can talk to a financial advisor there, absolutely. Who else had a question? I'll get to you in a second.
If you're a veteran, what information does the nursing funeral home need?
Yep. Good question. DD 214 is what we need, is the discharge papers.
Say that again.
DD 214 is discharge papers from the military. Has it on the form depending on, yes. And so that most of the benefits come at the cemetery, but there is a ceremony. You can have the honor guard come to the funeral home, the church, or the cemetery, the playing of taps at a cemetery if you want. Flag folding and the presentation of a flag. And then at the cemetery, if you have so there can either be an upright or ground level headstone or plaque, or a plaque on the back if you already have a headstone. And there's some other benefits for veteran benefits too that come from the veterans.
But you would need that form at the time of planning.
It's great to have, we'd love to have it in advance, but it actually can happen and when death occurs. I'll ask for it if somebody is a veteran. So bring it in if you're gonna come in and meet with me. So then you'll have it, and we just want a copy of it on file. Because we help, the funeral director helps. She had her question first and then I'll get to you, okay?
This is going back a long time. I was a teacher, I went to classes, and I had a teacher who very much stressed that the family should see the actual body of the person because it makes closure for everybody else, especially the family. Is there some way, if you choose cremation, that you can still view the body for the family and have the cremation also?
The answer is absolutely. We do that, yes. So we offer that with everything. Even if you're not opting to do that, even before closed casket, we give every opportunity to your family. And yes, so when people think in their brains in terms of visitation, a visitation or cremation, when you are being cremated, the reason why people are typically embalmed is for public visitation and viewing. That's really the only reason. And preservation, but it is for public viewing. So when cremation occurs and death has happened, I'll give 2 examples, and I'm usually doing this. So again, it's my mother. So she was in hospice in the home, and I saw her take her very last breath. Well, I didn't see it, but I knew when she waited for me to be home, I didn't need again to go into the funeral home and see her again. But it was offered. It was offered by the funeral director to make sure that I saw everyone, okay? So it's always offered. It will be offered again after an arrangement conference, because when someone passes, within 24 to 48 hours, your family is coming in to kind of finalize the arrangements. So before the cremation, because it takes about 48 hours for that, before that happens, your family is offering up, or your family is offered up to, if they want to view the body before the cremation, again, for closure And that's a lot of times what people, and I oftentimes when I'm actually describing this to people and these pre-arrangements, they're like, even thinking about it, you know, their family, oh, I wish we would have had that, you know, offered, because we've heard that other funeral homes, you know, or actually in the past, they didn't offer that. So as a teacher and advisor, and definitely from the funeral profession, it is an important factor for closure for some. Okay, you had a question?
No, yes, my husband died and was cremated in 1991. He was also a veteran. Well, we did not choose to have him buried. We scattered his ashes, so there was no service like afterward. And so you can choose. He got a flag, but that was as much of an acknowledgement as we had.
Mm-hmm.
But because we did that the way we did, we did not have casket. We got our ashes just in a cardboard container, which of course saved us. I don't know. Now, we would not have that option for me because we no longer own this farm. So, what else can be done with ashes?
So we say that we are not the scattering police,
Yes.
okay? But technically we do have to tell you that cremated remains should be scattered on private land, okay? Only. Do we know that it happens at Lambeau Field? Do we know that it happens on beaches in Hawaii? Do we know that it happens in Colorado? Do we know that they get shot up in space now, maybe? Who knows? So, and sometimes people will ask permission. There's special places like the Arboretum. I mean, people can ask permission to have that. And we know that it does happen. So ask permission. If that's what I advise you to do, if that's what's going to happen. And I turn, you know, if you have a plan that there was a place, a lake, a river, a something special of that, we know that that happens. We're not, we've been told, but if somebody got caught, the citation would be littering, and I'm sure that that is more of a mortifying for the family, if anything, that they got a citation for littering. So, but that, from that perspective, it's,
I don't know if this is still true, but someone told me when they had no place, that the people who cremated told them they would scatter them. I don't know, it was on their gardens or what.
and you know what, a Grace has scattering gardens, and this is a trend. This is a trend because cremation is becoming more and more popular. So there's probably about now 65% of the population that is electing to have cremation. Around the country, there are more and more places that have legal scattering gardens. And so there's just not any in Wisconsin right now. I think it will trend that we will eventually, because places in terms of hospice, you know, I know Grace has their gardens and they own their own land, and so when you have gone under hospice under a Grace and people have talked about it, I'm sure that they have asked, and so that does happen. So does that make sense? Okay.
Because I don't know where ours are mine are going.
Right, well, I'm not gonna tell anybody, don't tell me, we can tell in private.
My question is about obituaries. I just read recently, I think it was in Art magazine, that scammers are reading obituaries where people give their maiden names, their brothers or sisters, so on and so forth, that you need to be very careful about what goes in your obituary. Would you comment on that?
I'm gonna say yes. We do constantly see that. In terms of obituary, I guess from that perspective, I don't really, yes, there's bad people out there. I mean, shame on them.
But
And
you wanna protect your loved ones.
you do want it to protect your loved ones. So maybe not put in, I know that we did a whole seminar, and this was, you know, or a little workshop on writing your own obituary. And, you know, I don't think necessarily, you have to do that. You don't have to write people's maiden names, and you can put whatever it is that you want in your obituary. So you don't have to legally, the only legal document when I meet with families or when the funeral director meets with families is the death certificate. That's where you need that legal stuff. Your mother's maiden name, your father's maiden name. It's for the death certificate. It doesn't have to be in the obituary, so that's
But a lot of times the obituary, that's what you look for to know, to connect it to someone
True.
you might have gone to school with, somebody
True.
you might have worked with, somebody you might have
True.
known. I mean, it kind of leaves you out there hanging.
Yeah, that is true.
But you don't have to put their city or their place of where they actually live.
It's a sad world.
It is a sad world, yes.
There have been times that I have seen and have known that 2 obituaries can be written. One that can go in the paper and one that is read at your funeral.
Okay.
So that the funeral is where you can have all those things listed.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. A lot of times, we are meeting from Gunderson or a different funeral home. We're doing, because the papers are so expensive and it is online, we're doing the larger version online. And so it is online. 'Cause that's how, I know, that's how you share it, and that's how you know, get it out, get the word out, and this is our day now. This is where we're at, because essentially someday, I don't know when, but I don't know if there will actually be physical papers. I don't think that there's going to be a Wisconsin State Journal, and, you know, I love the papers, but I don't know if it's going to be that. Yes.
I was also a town clerk, so we had a lot of people that would come for the ancestry and want to go to the cemetery to look at that. And this has become a lost art. And there aren't very many stones and permanent places any longer that they have them.
And that is, so you have the flip of that, because you have that, and people, you know, are trying to do their ancestry, they're trying to, you know, find out, and this is, you know, that was the only place where they could check. I'm like, is either, and we do, the obituary is typically out there, when it's online, it's out there for a long time, yes.
When you do a short obit, in the paper and
Yes.
online?
Yes.
And a long one at the funeral?
Yes, so typically, yes.
And you see some short ones.
Yes, well, because in the Wisconsin State Journal, it's about $100 an issue. Just to set it up in the State Journal is no less than probably $500. So, and if you're seeing the ones that you're seeing about this, we usually say $600 to $800.
Okay, so we live here, but we are getting buried in Columbus, Wisconsin. So do you help with connections for markers for the gravesite? You know, I don't know who to call out there and say, can I set up an appointment to create our marker?
Absolutely, we help you. So right just off the top of our head, the one that's even closer, which a lot of people use, is Peckman's, which is out by the airport. So that's a pretty big one, but we can also, like, you can also do just Google headstone or monuments in your area. I don't know, there might be something that's like closer, maybe Oconomowoc, I don't know which way you want to necessarily go. we use, 3 or 4 big ones that are kind of encompassing the area. There's, one in Janesville, there's one, obviously, or near the airport, which is Peckman. There's Spellman in Sauk City. There is Dodgeville Monument. There's D'Orazio, which I actually think D'Orazio's been bought out by Peckman. I'm uncertain about that, but we mostly use the ones that are in Dane County and Columbia County, so that's in Columbia County. So yeah, I think there's one in Portage, to be honest. I don't know how close that, yeah, we help, yeah. Yeah.
Colin had a question. Colin, when my mom passed, my dad was still alive, we asked him, so Dad, what kind of funeral would you like to have? And he's a World War II vet, so it was pretty stark. He said, put me in a pine box, throw me in the ground, I don't care, I'm dead.
Yep.
We didn't follow his wishes, but okay. Locally, are you seeing the trend to green burials?
Yes, there is a trend towards green burial. We have one of the only green burial sites in Wisconsin, and that's Natural Path Sanctuary, which is out in Verona on Spring Rose Road. There's also one in Iowa County, in Barneville, called Circle Sanctuary. There's also, and I think there is talk of one that's going to maybe be developed that's over by Bishop's Bay, perhaps, because Terrence Wall, I think it's Terrence Wall, he's a developer. His father wanted that, and he's a developer out near Bishop's Bay, and so he wants to make some land in between that development and Holy Wisdom, I think, is the seminary or the place that's
Monastery.
out there. What's up?
It's called a monastery.
Yeah,
Holy
the
Wisdom
monastery, yes, thank you. Yes, so out there. So there's talk of that. It takes some time to build that, but I think that is a trend. And it's, even though it's old, as far as from World War II, my dad says it too, Korean War as well. He's like right around that same time. So yeah, plain pine box, absolutely. I've heard that quite a bit, so.
And they were more expensive when my dad died. He wanted a pine box, and it was more expensive to have a pine box than it was a casket.
Isn't that weird? Yep, that's weird.
Pine was expensive, huh?
Yes. Anybody else have any more questions? So in that little information that I gave you was just, so notes from today, I don't know if you took, so just the tips at least, and whether or not, so I have my card, if you, anytime, or if there's information that you want to fill out in advance, and we can set a time to talk at any time. But I don't remember the next time that we're going to be here, but we might be doing green burial next time, I think. I think we're on, what is green burial? I think we're scheduled to do that one here, and I think we're also doing veteran benefits. What are veteran benefits? Sometime in November, I think. So.
Are you gonna do an obituary again?
I want,
We missed it.
I know, I want to ask her because, I'll ask Ann to see if we do obituary writing again, because Mike, I think I mentioned, I know you're a little late, but my colleague, she did a little bit on writing your obituary and a little bit on pre-planning. So I have a bigger, fuller presentation for writing your obituary, so where I share different people's ideas. And I heard these people are all readers and stuff, so we gave recommendations of books and stuff, like where you, George Hesselberg, does anybody remember George Hesselberg? He has a book called Deadlines. So it's just a collection of books, or obituaries, and there's also another one, I can't remember what it's called, so, but yeah, I'll ask Ann to see if we can come back and do that, so, yeah. Oh,
First question, can you roll back to number 3 and then I can finish writing my notes. The second question is, will you be the contact person down here? Or will there be somebody else? Are they gonna keep switching people?
you mean for funeral home? So,
We had Dave.
You had Dave Scheidel first.
We had Dave.
You had
and
Dave.
Dave was wonderful.
Dave is wonderful,
Dave
unfortunately.
is no longer there.
He's no longer here. Dave came from Rose Lawn, so he knew the cemetery side of things, and then he worked for Gunderson, so and then
And
he
I
was a
had him
funeral-
for both.
Oh, boy.
And I know where he is now.
Now you have somebody in assisted living too? Oh, no. Okay, so, yeah, so
But-
I am it for
But
now.
having a contact person is much nicer than having, well, today we have this person, tomorrow we have this person.
Partly
I
it's
mean,
my fault.
there's-
I'm on the pre-need side and so was Dave.
Okay,
So for funeral direction, normally there's a funeral director that gets assigned to people in the families in Oregon. I wish there was just one funeral director, but we're a big team.
right.
But normally there's probably going to be a set of 3 people that would be in rotation that would come out too. So probably Alyssa Halverson Gowen, she grew up in Stoughton. She's one. Casey Wilson, funeral director, she has served families here down in Oregon, and I can't remember who the other one might be, so. But,
Some of us
but-
from Oregon have chosen to go to Madison, so, because we're closer to
Yeah.
Rose Lawn.
right, yes. My cell phone is a direct line to me. It doesn't go to Gunderson and get routed. There's a bottom number that actually goes to a Gunderson and then gets routed to me, but the top number is my personal cell phone. Just don't call me at 12 midnight. Anybody else have any questions? All right, well, I look forward to our next conversation if you guys come. Sorry, remember when it's at, so thank you guys so much for having us. I hope you had some pleasurable time. Great. Again, pat yourselves on the back.